Poštovane koleginice i kolege, nastavljamo naš događaj Climate Art Hub sa jednim keynote predavanjem koji će se nastaviti na engleskom jeziku zato što je naša sagovornica međunarodna ekspertkinja iz ove oblasti. Tako da nadam se da svi znate engleski i da nije problem da naredna komunikacija i sesija će biti na engleskom. Dear students, dear colleagues and guests, I'm really delighted to welcome you all today to the next session of our special international event that is Climate Art Hub, which is an open keynote lecture by our dear guest Louise Smith. Louise is the founder and managing director of the Neptune Sustainability, which is a consulting organization that is specialized in environmental impact assessments in various fields, but especially in the field of audiovisual and film and television production. This lecture is planned and promises to be a unique opportunity for our students, for our faculty, for our guests, professionals, and the wider audience to get the valuable information and knowledge about environmental issues in the cultural scope in general, but especially those that are focused on audiovisual creation and film and television industry. During this lecture, we will gain insights from an expert in, for us, a relatively new field of research and new field of practice and procedures in film and TV production. So I encourage you all to participate in this interesting session. Of course, after the lecture in the Q&A part of the session. I am sure that it will be very useful, very educational, and enriching experience for all. And I look forward to hearing your questions after the presentation. Dear Louise, welcome to our school.
Thank you.
And of course, thank you for the time that you dedicated to sharing your valuable experience in this field.
Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. It's great to be with you today. My name's Louise. I won't introduce much more than that because it's already been done so well. I've got some slides that I'm going to share, and I'm just going to run through a little bit about what we do and how we've been working to improve sustainability in film and television. I specifically work a lot in the UK, but I also work with Torino Film Lab on their green film lab. So we have been traveling across Europe with a green filming program and protocol. So I think the movement is growing and spreading, and we're working together. We can all kind of get further more quickly. So let's see if we can't get the technology to work as we would like. Perfect. Can everybody see the screen okay? Excellent. I can see nodding. Fantastic. Thank you for the thumbs up. Okay, so I'm going to talk specifically about sustainability in film and television. I'm going to give a little bit of context on what the size of the problem is in terms of our climate impacts, a little bit of information about the role of sustainability on set. As was mentioned, this is quite a new area of study in a lot of places in the world, but in the UK and in the US for about 10 years now, there have been programs in place. So there's a calculator and a system called Albert in the UK and the Green Production Guide over in the US. So it has been developing over that time, and just recently, in the last couple of years, it's really grown, and a lot more people and a lot more places are starting to think about how to bring sustainability into our activities on set. I've got some kind of tips on how to get started and how I work with the productions that I work with, and then some sort of more practical tips and some case studies. So the size of the problem, according to Albert data in the UK, which was collected from thousands of different types of productions in the UK, an average tentpole production, so this is to be considered a tentpole, the budget is over $70 million. So this is a big movie, big Disney movie, Marvel movie, something like that. That one big movie generates on average 2,840 tons of CO2. One movie. Of course, a very big movie, but still, it's a huge amount of carbon. It would take 15 million square meters of forest an entire year to absorb that much carbon. So if we think about all of the films and all of the television and all of the audiovisual projects being produced across the world, there is literally not enough land to put enough trees to absorb that amount of carbon. So we are a bit of a problem. The industry in London alone produces about 125,000 tons of CO2 every year. And that's equivalent to about 24,000 homes in London. And this idea of carbon tons, it's carbon dioxide is invisible. It doesn't smell. You can't see it. So I thought that this image here on the right was just a really useful way to kind of picture what 1 ton of CO2 looks like. So this balloon is filled with the equivalent of 1 ton. And you can see at the bottom there's a person standing there to give a bit of scale. So 2,840 of these big balloons is what comes out of one big film production. And the way that the data breaks down across the production is as so. So about on this left side here, you can see about half of it is from the fuel that we burn. So that's equivalent to about 3.4 million miles driven by a passenger vehicle. And where we're burning that fuel, about 70% of it is in car journeys and the trucks moving our equipment. So ground transportation, basically. And then the other 30% is the diesel that we put into generators to power lighting, to power base camps, things like that. So that's where half of all of those emissions are coming from, is just from our fuel alone. And then the next chunk down, the 30% there, that's production energy utilities. So from, again, one big film, it's equivalent to 450 tons of coal being burned. And that energy utilities, what that means is the gas that we use to heat spaces. So putting on the heating in the production offices, in the workshops, perhaps in the stages, is about 30% of that. And then the remaining 70% is the electricity that we use. So literally turning on the lights, running laptops, running stage lighting, makeup running hair dryers, costume running washing machines, all of that kind of stuff. The next chunk down there, the 16% of this average footprint is from our air travel. So essentially that's mostly if a production is shooting in more than one location and they need to put people on flights. It could be that a buyer from the costume team is going somewhere to purchase some specific special fabric, maybe. It could be that the cast are coming from America to film in the UK or in France or in Serbia or wherever, or the director is from somewhere else. So that's basically just kind of commercial air travel makes up about 90% of that. And the final 10% is chartered air travel. So this might be a very big feature where they have literally chartered an entire commercial plane to take their crew to a foreign location to shoot. Or it could be that you have a very, very famous lead actor who insists upon traveling in a private jet. So that's where that comes from. And then the final 4% of this footprint comes from accommodation, equivalent to the electricity use of about 34 homes. The accommodation is basically if that cast member from America is filming in the UK, they have to stay somewhere while they're filming. If you are shooting somewhere that is too far away from your main studio location, maybe the crew need to stay overnight between shoot days. So essentially that's where that comes from. No, it's not letting me ping on now. Hang on. So what do I tell my productions? Essentially, we cannot recycle our way out of climate change. We have put a lot of energy and we became very distracted by putting recycling bins on set and composting our food waste from catering and making sure we didn't have plastic bottles and everybody brought their own water bottle to refill on set. And those things are very important. They're very, very visible. Every single crew member needs to drink water all day. Every single crew member will create waste, whether it's in their workshop or from the lunch leftovers. So it's very, very visible what we create in terms of waste. But in terms of the carbon impact of it, it's not as meaningful as it is visible, if that makes sense. So we can't just put some recycling bins on the set and go, okay, we've solved the problem. This is a sustainable production now. That's not really getting to that piece that we just looked at there. 50% of the problem is the fuel we burn. So we must fundamentally shift the way we operate if we want to have a future where filmmaking is in any way sustainable. So that's a bit of a bummer and a lot of numbers, but it's not all doom and gloom. There are some brilliant things happening at the moment. Again, lots of big things happening in the States. We've had a great project just launched this summer in London. So Amazon Studios have invested in a company called Moxion Power. They make, so just behind this chap here, you can see the thing on wheels. That's a huge battery. And that is, they have invested so that Moxion are able to create and manufacture these batteries. And those batteries will replace diesel generators on their sets. They are clean, they are silent, there's no emissions, there's no horrible fumes for the crew to breathe in. And then you take this battery back at the end of the shoot day, recharge it at your base location, and it will be topped up to use again the following day. So they're actually putting money into providing these cleaner solutions on set. Netflix have a program that started in 2020 called Lights Climate Action. Their 2022 ESG report was released quite recently, and based on the actions they've taken under this program, which was to be net zero by 2022 and to have a target to continually reduce their emissions rather than just do the offsets in the meantime. So the 2022 report showed that their scope 1 and 2 footprint values were 30% lower than they would have been if they hadn't started to take this action on their set. So this picture here is a hydrogen power unit on one of their sets. Basically, there is no emission from hydrogen power. The only thing that comes out of it is clean water that you can drink. There's no fumes, there's no carbon dioxide coming out of that process. And then over in London, we had the launch of what we call the Grid project. So just behind the CEO of Film London there, you can see the kind of cables in that cabinet behind him. So essentially that cabinet was installed specifically for film and television productions. This is in a large car park in a park in London, which is used all the time as a base camp for film productions. And normally they turn up in this beautiful park, they park all the trailers and the caterers, and then they put on a very, very big, loud, smelly, horrible generator in this beautiful green park. And so Film London worked with the mayor's office and several other sponsors to actually build this bespoke cabinet. We asked the location managers, what kind of sockets do you need? Do you need 32 amps? Do you need a 64 amp socket? We will build it exactly how you need it with the amount of power to run the biggest unit base you could fit in this park. And now you are not allowed to bring a generator if you use that park to base your camp in. And the power that goes to this box is completely 100% renewable. It's from wave tidal solar power. There's no carbon emissions associated with the power that comes out of there. And the idea of this is that this one cabinet, we are taking data from it now, and we will share that information so that the idea is lots of these can be put anywhere. The information will be open source. So if you want to build one in Belgrade, you can. So we're in the process of monitoring and evaluating to see how that works and what the carbon savings are now. So at Neptune, which is my company that I've been running for too long now, I can't even remember how many years, many years, but specifically in film and television, I started working in 2013, so 10 years in film and television. Our impact so far with the productions that we've worked with, lots of big American productions, because they film in the UK a lot. We've had almost 48,000 tons of CO2 that we've managed to work with our productions to save. We've switched fossil fuels in our generators to a product called HVO. It's hydro-treated vegetable oil. Essentially, it's like waste cooking oil. And chemically, it's very similar to diesel, which is a fossil fuel, but it's a renewable product, and it's a waste product that we turn into energy. So we've been working with our productions to use that instead of fossil fuel-based diesel. We've used almost 2 million litres of that now. The carbon impact of using that renewable fuel compared to diesel is about 70 to 90% lower. So really easy switch, massive impact. We donated almost 27,000 meals to kids clubs, homeless shelters, all that kind of stuff. So any leftover meals at catering at the end of the day, we work with charitable partners to collect them and redistribute them to people in need. We have over 19,000 tons of waste has been diverted from landfill. So we, of course, initially will recycle whatever products we are able to recycle. We compost all of our food waste. And then anything that we're not able to recycle goes through a process called waste to energy. So the waste is incinerated essentially, and by burning it, energy is released and they create electricity from it. So again, we're turning waste into something useful. We also work to make sure that there aren't single-use plastic water bottles on our sets. We're up to about 1.9 million bottles avoided now, which I can't even imagine how much space that would take up, but an awful lot, I imagine. So what do we do all day? What's the purpose of sustainability on a production? So the sustainability manager is there to research, educate, and advise your key decision makers in making the most sustainable choices. We're there to do the research for you because you're busy trying to produce your movie. The technology that's available to us and the regulations that we have to work under for the government wherever we're filming are constantly changing and updating, but it's my job to focus on what those are, keep up to date with it all, and make sure that when the cameras start rolling and everybody gets super busy just trying to get through the schedule, we don't let sustainability fall off the agenda. And then at a more strategic and industry-wide level, I work with the supply chain. So I work with the people that provide us with trailers, with vehicles, with batteries, do our waste management to make sure that the clean, sustainable options exist, that I know how to get them, I know how much they cost, I know who to speak to. And if we want more batteries to be available to us as alternatives to generators, I can signal to the companies, hey, you should probably invest in more of these because we will hire them if they're available to us. So we can signal future demand and try and kind of tip the supply chain to be more sustainable. We also calculate what's called the green premium. So that's the cost, or sometimes the saving, of implementing a sustainable solution when it's compared to what the business as usual would be. So if we weren't there and everybody just did their usual thing, we'll find out what the cost of that is. And then we look at a clean option, which is more sustainable. We look at what the cost is and we compare the two and see where the difference is. Does it cost more? Is it cost neutral? Or can we save some money by being green? So essentially that green premium is how many pounds, dollars, euros you need to spend to save 1 ton of carbon. So you might have 3 options available to you, but one, you have to spend $100 to save 1 ton of carbon. One, maybe you only have to spend $10, and one, maybe you only have to spend $1. So by working out all of these things, we can figure out where to put our energy. What's the best bang for the buck? How can we be green, but not blow the budget, essentially? And I heard someone mention that instead of stating the clean option as a green premium, what we really ought to do is say that the business as usual is the dirty discount. So that's what I'm going to start using from now on, I think, to, if the producers are not keen to go with the green option, say, oh, no, you're going to take the dirty discount. Oh, interesting. Okay. So how do we approach sustainability on set? So there's two ways to consider implementing sustainability on a production. You can focus on the protocol and earning the points to get you towards your certification. And there's a couple of examples up here. So Albert will give you a sustainable production stamp. The Environmental Media Association has what they call a green seal. There's also the green film protocol that works across Europe. So you can focus on, oh, okay, if I have 100% LED lighting package, I get 5 points and I'm closer to being stamped as sustainable. But sometimes that kind of distracts you from what your biggest impacts actually are. And you can kind of get tunnel vision looking at these scorecards and just trying to tick the boxes. Whereas I think the really valuable thing is to find out where the biggest impacts from your production are and focus there first. So I always start by reviewing the script and the schedule to see what we need to achieve on screen and how we're going to do it behind the scenes. I'll look at our location lists and work out where our biggest CO2 impacts going to be. And then I can focus my energy on how we reduce those. So for example, I mentioned the HVO fuel. The associated emissions are about 90% less by just switching that fuel. So if we're going to be on the road quite a lot and need to have diesel generators because we don't have access to grid power, I know we're going to burn a lot of fuel in generators. So my first step might be to speak to the locations team and make sure we're buying that cleaner, lower carbon fuel. Or it might be switching to batteries. So this picture at the bottom here, this is a beautiful frozen lake in Norway. This is when we were filming James Bond, No Time to Die. And the area was very sensitive. There's lots of bird life and what have you there. And the Norwegian government were very concerned that they didn't want us to bring diesel onto the site, because if something were to go wrong and we to spill it on this pristine lake, that would be kind of an environmental disaster. So luckily we were able to bring these batteries in. That's sitting in a little sled. We were able to take it right out to where they needed it. There was absolutely no risk that we were going to cause any kind of pollution with that. On top of which, it's completely silent when it's running. So the nesting birds weren't being disturbed. The sound team loved it because they didn't have to keep thinking about making sure they weren't capturing the sound of a generator in the shot. So sometimes clean technology actually has lots of other great uses and benefits that are not just about the environmental impact. Once I've gone through my script and schedule and what have you, I meet with the producers, the production team, locations, electrical, and transport. So I discuss what their needs are and how we can plan to reduce the impact, but still get the schedule and the movie shot. So the reason I focus specifically on these departments is because they power the set and they buy all the fuel. So transport are hiring all of our vehicles, which we have to put fuel into. The electrical team are hiring generators to power all the lighting on set. And the locations team are hiring generators to power everything that's not on set. So the trailers where the actors are, the trailers where makeup are, the toilets, the catering, all of those kind of behind the scenes things. These guys put the power in place. So that's who I need to speak to make sure we're doing it in a cleaner way. So essentially every gallon of fuel we burn means we emit some CO2. So we start, the kind of philosophy of how I start is to reduce and optimize our activities first. So we want to maximize fuel and energy efficiency by collaborating between teams, making sure we plan really well to reduce waste and use the technology that's available to us now. We also ensure things like generators are the correct size. Quite often we carry generators far bigger than we need to, and they run much less efficiently, and that's just a waste of fuel, basically. We want to rent the most efficient and appropriate vehicles for the job, maximize LED set lighting, make sure things like our base camps are set up close to set to reduce all of that travel during the shoot day, and then just turn things off when they're not in use. Super obvious, doesn't always happen. So once we've done that, we've reduced all of that waste and we've optimized what we've got going on. The next step is to electrify. So we want to use grid power wherever it's available. If we're shooting in a school, let's not bring generators in. There's power right there. Let's use that. We want to use mobile batteries to supplement generators, whether it means we can have a smaller generator, run it for less hours, or hybridize them together to reduce the amount of fuel that the generators is burning. And then things like working with stage facilities to make sure that things like EV charging are available, so that if our transport team hires an EV, they can actually charge it up at the studio. And then the next kind of section down is to decarbonize. So that's requesting a renewable electricity supply at the studio where the stages are, and then using that HVO fuel, because that's a lower carbon option that does the same thing. Few practical tips on waste. Everyone can see waste. It takes a lot of focus. I've already talked about how we got really, really bogged down in recycling and plastic water bottles years ago. But what we really, really need to do is not think about waste when it's already in a trash can. We want to think about what we buy in prep, because that may become waste. And if we can engineer it out during prep, that it won't become waste because we've just saved it. You know, waiting until there's dumpsters full of trash, it's too late then. We've already used the thing and it's already become waste. So really thinking about what we bring into the set, and how we can optimize that and reuse it or rent it instead of buying it. So basically avoiding use where we can. And then where you can't remove or reduce what you're using, source it from somewhere that is, you know, perhaps if you have a costume, can you use secondhand or can you rent it? So it's been used before and it will be used again instead of buying something new. And then again, if we get to the point where we do need the material, so it might be timber to build a set, make sure we've got a sustainably sourced alternative so that it's coming from an FSC assured certified forest that we know is a sustainable place to get our timber to build sets. And then moving down, you know, at some point it might be that it becomes waste and we want to recycle it or recover some value. So that's that waste plant that will burn the residual waste and create electricity from it. So there's kind of a hierarchy of thinking, not just wait until you get down as far. See how far down recycle is on that. There's so many steps to take before you start splitting it up and recycling it. Power generation is the same. So again, there's a hierarchy. We should start with grid power and renewable energy wherever we can. If you're filming in the middle of a field, that's not going to be possible. So can we switch to a low carbon option like a battery or a hydrogen power or solar panels to support a battery? And then hybridizing, so it might be that a battery supplements your generator so that it has to run for fewer hours. And then things like fuel choices, so switching to that HVO product or all of those kind of things. And then finally, if you have created the emissions, removing them from the atmosphere. So supporting decarbonisation efforts. So it might be investing in carbon credits to protect a mangrove, which is a carbon sink, something like that. So offsetting your impacts afterwards. There's a few reports that have come out quite recently that are really great that look around power in general. The Fuel Project was put together by Film London. It is available for free on their website and has some fantastic guidance on vehicles, on power generation, all sorts of stuff. Absolutely brilliant report. They've just this week announced that they're going to do a phase 2 of this project. So if you're interested in reading more, I would highly recommend that project. And BAFTA Alba also released the Studio Sustainability Standard. So again, all of this information is available on BAFTA Albert's website. And this is a standard that studio facilities can work towards to provide a more sustainable place to film. Catering also, our meal choices have climate implications. So different choices when you're feeding your crew will have different impacts on the environment. So the option here is how many kilos of greenhouse gas per serving of meal. And you can see this line at the bottom here, how carbon intensive beef is, even compared to lamb, which is also carbon intensive. But choosing chicken rather than beef is a quarter of the impact. And if you're feeding 50 people on your set for 20 days, that's quite a big impact. So what we are working towards now is we generally don't serve beef from catering, sometimes not beef and lamb. Some shows have vegetarian days, and that just really brings down our impact. Everyone is still fed a nice, nutritious, healthy, tasty meal, but we're just thinking about the climate impact of the foods we choose. And then when food becomes waste, so this could be from preparation. So it could be potato peelings. It could be onion peel, things like that. So there's some food waste inherent in how we prepare food, but also perhaps there's some food left at the end of service that is not suitable to donate to charity. So we want to make sure that that doesn't just end up in a landfill, because when food breaks down, it releases a gas called methane, which is a very powerful greenhouse gas, much stronger than CO2. So first, we want to make sure we reduce how much waste we create. We do not want to be paying for food that is going to be thrown away. That just makes no sense. If there is food left over and it is still edible, find a local charitable partner to donate it to at the end of lunch. And then finally, collect that food together in order to make sure that it is processed properly. So again, this waste food, so it's a waste product, if you send it to an anaerobic digester, which is essentially like a giant tub kept at 55 degrees centigrade, because the bacteria that break down food operate very, very quickly and very excitedly at that temperature. That's their favorite temperature. So they break the food down very, very quickly. What you end up with then is the gas will come off the top. That can be used to create electricity. So you've just turned a waste product into something valuable again. And then you get what they call digestate at the bottom, which is kind of like a not very nice sludge of kind of broken down food. That, however, is again a really vital product that gets sent off to farmlands and becomes an organic fertilizer to put on crops in order to put those nutrients back into the soil. So again, we've managed to turn what was waste food into two useful things by making sure that we know where it's gone and that it's processed correctly. Travel, obviously, we all know travel has a big impact. I imagine everybody's super aware that plane travel is highly carbon intensive. So again, here's a nice chart from the European Environment Agency looking at the impact of, so this is how many grams of CO2 is emitted per passenger kilometre. So you can again see how much more plane travel is than if the alternative is available by rail, for example. Enormous difference, 285 grams per kilometre or 14. Now, across Europe, there are pretty good networks of trains available. It varies in cost and availability, but where it's possible, taking trains to get kit and people there instead of planes is always a huge difference made in terms of carbon impact. Again, even if you are, it's a short distance and you're taking cars, if more people can go in the same car instead of everybody taking one car per person, then again, you get everybody to the same place that you need them to get to, but maybe you can take one vehicle instead of three. Wider impact. So again, costume, props, set decoration, art department materials, office materials, if it's possible to rent them rather than buying them new, or to buy them secondhand so that those things already exist, that's really where we want to go. Again, craft and catering, if we can ask them not to use single-use packaging, real plates, cutlery, and things like that, so that we're using things over and over again instead of creating waste. And then looking at recirculating materials back into the community once you've wrapped. So perhaps another production can use them when you're done with them. So in summary, considering the impacts in the life cycle of our operations and materials is called optimization, and you will save materials, you'll prevent waste, and you'll reduce carbon emissions by optimizing. And because you've cut all of that waste out of your operations, you will also save money. Little case study of a production I worked on a few years ago, Jurassic World Dominion. It was the final Jurassic World movie. Excuse me, just have some water. So we shot this mostly in London and around. They also went to 3 other countries, but the studio stage work was all done in London. We were at Pinewood Studios, which has a renewable electricity tariff. So every time we used the grid power, there were 0 emissions at source from that. When we were on location out in the countryside, we did use generators, but we used HVO, renewable fuel, in all of our generators. We were shut down for COVID, and when we came back, we very quickly switched to a completely digital office. So we had no printing, There was no travel that wasn't necessary, so we used a lot of video conferencing. Absolutely everything we had was digital: start paperwork, timesheets, invoicing, everything. On screen, we did have mention of the impacts of climate change, the impacts of biodiversity loss, and then the potential impact that that biodiversity loss has on the global food chain. So there was something on screen kind of representing sustainability as well. Our sets were all built using FSC certified timber. The dinosaurs themselves, they make out of molds using fiberglass and silicon. We found a really great company nearby that was able to take that those molds and melt them down so that the silicon could be used again. So the dinosaur molds were recycled. There were a lot of stunts in this movie. So we had a lot of stunt wires, and because of safety concerns, you cannot use stunt wires again because they're not rated for safety anymore. They might have some wear and tear on them, so you cannot use them again. So usually they just all end up in the trash. We found a company that we worked with to buy our stunt wires that took them all back and broke it down to the tiny, tiny fibers that the wires are made out of. And then they were able to start from scratch again to make those stunt wires into other products. So they were all recycled as well. We had absolutely no beef served for the 22-week shoot in all 4 countries that we shot in. All the crew brought their own water bottles, and production provided reusable coffee cups for everybody so that we reused everything over and over again. The coffee cups themselves were, it's a company called R Cup, and they were made out of recycled, like Starbucks cups. So again, they had turned a waste product into a new renewable product. We composted all of our food waste, and all of the bowls, boxes, knives, forks were made from compostable products. So we were able to compost even all of those things when we were finished. Is green light contingent on this? So are you going to be able to make a movie or a TV show if you don't think about all of this in future, basically? So all of these things are kind of relatively new in the news as well. So Universal Studios has what they call the Greener Light program. So every film that is greenlit at Universal Pictures has to now include a plan for sustainability. They have to embed sustainable practices and eco-conscious forethought across the entirety of the filmmaking process, from when they're greenlit to when they shoot to when they release. So this is now reliant. You will not be greenlit by Universal if you do not fall under these categories, basically. And the government in Austria just recently brought out a new green production incentive. So this is tied to their tax incentive. You actually get an additional percentage, so more money, if you can demonstrate that your production is sustainable. So they're financially incentivizing it. Just looking at how this works on screen. So how do we impact our audiences with sustainability? So one really, really famous example of this is the David Attenborough BBC show Blue Planet 2. So they did a bunch of research after these episodes were aired, and they found that people's knowledge about environmental issues increased significantly after they had watched this. And actually, the public outcry about plastic in the oceans was so great that the law has been changed in the UK as a result of this. Basically, everybody was in complete uproar when they saw what was happening, and now the law is different on single-use plastics. Succession, I don't know if anybody watches. It's about a billionaire media mogul family who are all pretty awful. There's a character in the show who believes when his uncle dies that he's going to inherit all of this money, and he finds out when the guy dies and they read the will that in fact all of the money is being left to Greenpeace instead. And they looked at this after this episode airs, the amount of people looking into leaving money to Greenpeace on their website, when the traffic went up by 10 times the day after. So people watched that episode and were like, I'm going to actually take some action and maybe do this. Ted Lasso, fantastic show on Apple TV if you've seen it, about football players. Essentially, the young Nigerian defender Sam Obisanya, this chappie here in the middle, is from Nigeria, and they find out that the airline partner that is sponsoring their team, and the name is on the shirts, has been responsible for causing huge pollution in his home country. So I think you can see in the photograph there, he decides he won't go onto the pitch and wear this brand because they are polluting his native country. So they put the tape across where the branding is. And this character didn't really used to be like he was kind of a side character, but by taking this stand and having his teammates stand up for it, they were able to show kind of sustainable action in a positive light, and still have it fit in with the theme of the show, which is basically about a football team. And then there's green premise titles. So something like Don't Look Up on Netflix. It is about, the scientists trying to tell the public there's an asteroid going to hit the Earth and nobody's listening to them. It's really about climate change and how nobody's taking any action, even though it's happening to us right now. But again, you can have sort of a more obvious option there. And they did actually run a big media campaign after Don't Look Up came out. There were websites to kind of guide people on what you can do and to engage further after watching the movie. That's enough for me. That was a lot of talking. That is my website and my email address if anyone has got the space in their brain to ask questions or would like to know any more. And yeah, if anyone has questions, I'm quite happy to answer them.
Yes, of course we do, Louise. Thank you for this really insightful lecture. I will start with the first, and then I will ask my students and colleagues for eventual questions. I would like to ask you as a sustainable manager, that is your title in the production. When are you involved in the production time-wise? When are you reviewing the project? When are you starting to work with the producers?
So that's a really great question, and it varies a little bit. So some of the clients I work with the studio on every project they do in the UK. So I will start, for example, if it's a TV series, one season ends filming, I stay even before the scripts are written for the next one. So it's constant. So season 2, we did this. Season 3, we must get better. Mm-hmm. And then generally speaking, I try and get involved the week the line producer starts, because that's the person who's going to make all the on-the-ground decisions. So if they meet me the first week, they will make all of those decisions with that in mind, and we can really start as we mean to go on, instead of me trying to undo a lot of decisions already made. Now, it doesn't always work like that. On some productions, we get brought in later. It depends on the team. But really, I would want to be there 3 months before shoot, ideally. I mean, not full time. So if I go in for a little time at the beginning, meet the right people, go away, come back, because we generally have more than one production at any given time. So, but really you have to have conversations early before they sign the deals for the generators, for the lighting package, for the vehicles, and then kind of come in and out a little bit. And then maybe the month before shoot, we're there full time.
Okay. And what is your experience concerning producers in negotiating with how much they want to spend on the green agenda? Is it a struggle? Is it a negotiation? What is the process?
It's a struggle. Of course, everybody wants to be green, but they want it to be free. Again, it varies a lot. So some of the clients I work with, the studio will mandate that they must do this, and they put a line in their budget to cover it, and they are not allowed to remove that line. So some studios will say, if you are going to take our money to create this film, you must have a sustainability manager. Here's how much money you have to spend on it. And then it's above the producer's decision. And in other times, yes, it's a lot of negotiation. Oh, do you really need that many days? Do you need a coordinator? Do you need da, 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 da? So that's where being able to approach it like a producer and bring in this idea of, I'm going to cost up what you're doing now and how I can help you do it. It's greener, but also it should be cheaper because we're removing all that waste. I can tell you how to save money by preventing all of this waste. And normally then they're like, oh, that sounds like information I should know. So I try to think like they think.
And now I will open the opportunity for our audience to pose the questions, if there is any. Yes, there is. Just pass on the microphone.
Thank you, Louise, for this very interesting lecture. So my name is Julia, and I wonder if we talk about really big opportunities to reduce carbon footprint. That could be, according to what we heard, like replacing fuels with, for example, this HBO. So how accessible this HBO is? Is it broadly accessible? Like, who are the key suppliers? So if we talk about smaller markets, for example, like Serbia, so is it something that is accessible, or it would be a privilege for a time being for these big markets and big studios? So, you know, would this then disadvantage like smaller productions?
It's difficult to hear, but I heard you ask about the availability of HVO. Sort of regionally, is it available, and would a small production be a disadvantage? Did I capture everything?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so Serbia specifically, I'm actually not sure. I do know I have some colleagues who work in Budapest and across Hungary a lot, and I think they actually have worked with some Serbian productions. And the HVO was not available in Hungary at all when they first started working. And they kept having conversations with the diesel suppliers to say, can you also stock and supply this product to us? And they demonstrated that specifically they work with a lot of American productions as well, because the studio's in Budapest. But they kept having conversations for a while and demonstrating that there was a desire to use this product. And if their usual fuel suppliers would stock it, they would buy it. And now it's available there. So I think it would be a similar journey. If you can, same in Italy now, ENI will provide, generally they're just a fossil fuel company, but people kept asking for a renewable alternative, and now in Italy you can also purchase it. So I think it probably would be that kind of journey. If every production keeps asking their usual fuel supplier, why don't you have this alternative? I hear it's much greener. Eventually, because their clients are requesting something, they will see that there's a business opportunity there, right? Everyone will buy their fuel from me if I provide the one that they're asking for. So I think it could be a slower journey, and it might be a journey, but that's the kind of change that, even though we can't see it tomorrow, if we can see it in a year, it will be progress. So I think the more demand signal that is heard, the more likely it is that things like this become available. Same with battery technology across Europe. As productions move around, it's becoming more and more easy to find the battery technology, because if crew use it and they like it and it works, which it does, then whoever you hire your kit from, if everybody keeps asking for it, they will stock it, because they want to stock what their clients are requesting. So yes, I think that would be it's probably not. I don't actually know specifically if it's available in Serbia. I would guess it's maybe unlikely. But that journey has happened in other areas recently, and I think if it's something that if you keep asking for it, they will eventually source it.
And perhaps do you have an idea what is the cost difference between Nissan and HBO?
So can you please indicate a cost?
I can hear you better now.
Okay. Could you please indicate the cost difference then between diesel, for example, and HBO, like percentages?
It depends where in the world you are. So there's a tax rebate on HVO used for power generation in the UK. So it is still slightly more expensive than diesel, but not very much, because it's a greener product. And I don't know, it depends on the country. So sometimes it is more expensive, yes. Sometimes there's a tax implication to it that makes it better, like a smaller increase, but it depends where you are.
If I may, one more question, of course. Okay, so you mentioned that Universal, for example, has their own green policy, right? All their productions. So is it part of a broader legislative framework in US, or it is just their internal policy?
That's just an internal policy. So there's nothing kind of legislatively that is pushing the studios. I think most of the big US corporations have made public climate commitments, and now they realize they have to reach those commitments to reach net zero emissions. And so this is part of their process to get themselves where they need to be in terms of their emissions. I do think as well, public perception has played a big role in that. No big corporation wants to be seen as, you know, the big dirty polluter. And so it makes more sense from a PR perspective to be seen to be doing the right thing. So I guess there's many motivations. And I think PR might be one of many. Great if they're doing the right thing for the wrong reason, they're still doing the right thing, you know. But yes, it's coming from internal. So most of the US studios have got something similar. The Universal one is specifically has things about on screen as well, which is interesting. But several studios, and also in the UK, there's through BAFTA, there's a climate commitment that every broadcaster in the UK has made to include climate content in the narrative on screen, whether that be making sure it's represented in the news or in a drama or in a cooking show. You know, oh, let's think about the climate impact of beef. You can build it into anything really, because it's our life, isn't it? It's how we move around. It's how we keep warm in the winter. So it's relevant to the audience as well. And again, that wasn't a legislative thing. It was the broadcasters coming together and saying, we need to do something about this.
Just a final one. Would you maybe say that it is much easier for a big corporation and big studios to adapt to all this kind of green initiative and green policy? Yeah, because they have, of course, a profit pools, yeah, like to invest then into these new initiatives. So are you perceiving this tension that maybe it actually helps in a way monopolizing the industry furthermore? Besides, you know, like the fact that in general sustainability and all the planet positive thing is a good thing. Like, how do you see this tension, yeah, like between democratizing, for example, production versus actually monopolizing it? And
I think in some ways it's easier because big corporations and broadcasters and studios have resources, right? Like the people to put this together, the money to implement it and things like that. But in other ways, it's more difficult because there's so many people and so many operations. Like it's like a giant tanker that you have to turn the direction of. If you see a huge tanker ship move, turning the direction takes a long time because it's a big, heavy thing. Whereas smaller independent productions have a lot more control in a lot of ways over their influence, because it's a smaller number of people and things that they have to change. They're independent of a lot of things, and generally speaking, they are much more sustainable anyway, because if you have a very limited amount of money to create your creative vision, and whatever it be, a TV show, a movie, whatever, you don't waste any money when you don't have enough, right? So you're not going to have kit that is not efficient, that burns lots of fuel, because fuel is expensive. So you're going to try, and you're not going to waste journeys. You're not going to waste time, because wasting time and energy is money. And when you operate as a small independent production, there isn't any money spare. So actually, I find that when I work with smaller productions, they are much more sustainable by nature because they have to be. And also, I think compared to working with Americans, for example, or Europeans, there's a really different mindset in terms of sustainability and the planet and waste. And I think it's really much more in people's minds in Europe than it is in America. You know, there they want to drive the giant cars and have the giant houses and heat the swimming pool, whereas that's not really the lifestyle that most Europeans have or actually seek. You know, we're much more likely to be happy to take public transport and to walk around our cities and to want green space instead of car parks and things like that. So it's interesting to see the cultural differences in how it comes more naturally to implement sustainability in some cultures than others.
Okay, there are any more questions? If not, I would like to conclude with one final remark about the main features of a green production. In a way, you mentioned some of the elements concerning fuel, concerning utilities, accommodation, and also and other things. And what would you say is the majority feature for one production to be standardized as a green one?
I think fuel, it has to be. When you look at that chart and you see 50% of our impact is coming from that. And I think as well, one big one that chart is very focused on carbon emissions. But one other thing that we have is we use a lot of materials for a short amount of time. And so building a circular economy instead of a linear one, I buy a product, I use a product, I throw it away, as opposed to I rent the product, I return it to the prop house, and it gets used again and again and again and again. I think that is a really good philosophy to have. And again, I think independent production does this so much better because it's cheaper and it makes more sense not to buy a load of new stuff. But because the process by its nature is ephemeral, one shoot will always end. It's just a project, right? And so most businesses don't work like that. If you run a school, your buildings you use for decades and decades and decades, and the desks you just use year after year after year. If you build a set, you shoot what that scene is, and then all of that set becomes useless to you. Now, I have to clear the stage out because I don't want to rent this stage anymore. And now it becomes kind of a problem almost. This stuff that you've taken what you need and now it's just trash to you almost. And most businesses don't work like that. That's something very specific to film and television, that we bring everything in, film it, and then ship it all out again.
Thank you. I have one more question, since we are at the university and you mentioned Torino Film Lab. My question is concerning educational programs that are dealing with these topics. Are there any in film schools in England? Are they standardized, or are they new right now? And are you part of some of those programs? Because I think it's really, really important to for the young filmmakers to be educated in time for this field.
Yeah, absolutely. So several universities in the UK are working with BAFTA, Albert, and they have classes in sustainable production if you are taking a director's course or the producer's course or whatever. So they are built into their curriculum now, that you will have a course on how to do this at a university. And I know that one of the universities, I think in New York, has just done a similar thing with the US-based program, where they're now building it into the film studies course. And the sort of certification process that all other productions use, there's like a school's version of it. So if you are making your student piece, you can apply this certification process and learn how to do it while you're still at university, so that when those people go out into the workforce, they already think with sustainability in mind. No one has to convince them, because I think most young people are very, very aware that we need to do something about climate change, and they're ready to do it. And so I think that will as they become part of the workforce, it will change because they know it has to and they want it to.
So to your knowledge, it is applied.
Yes, yeah, those are ones that I'm aware of. I think in Italy they might be looking into it, but I don't know if there's anything in place yet. But it's certainly beginning to become a part of the curriculum for film studies to have some sustainability class in there.
Okay, thank you, Louise, so much for this extensive lecture and conversation on this very, very important theme. By this, we will conclude this session about sustainability in film. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.
What